A kaiju within the Godzilla franchise having different and crazy origins depending on the version is not uncommon at all. Godzilla goes from being a reptile mutated by the atomic bombs to then being an extra-dimensional entity who's so powerful that the design we see isn't who he really is, but simply an avatar of himself. We also get a version where he's the reincarnation of vengeful spirit who died in World War II, who was being stopped by ancient guardians who were previous monsters, like King Hedorah who was previously an alien invader and Baragon. GMK Godzilla would have a non-canon sequel with Godzilla vs. Thor as well, where he'd be possessed by a demon called the Beast, and became the Fist of the Beast. Speaking of these Marvel Godzilla crossovers, I wanted to talk for a second about Godzilla vs. Hulk. Godzilla is being attacked by a character named Dr. Demonicus. After years of pursuing Godzilla, he sampled DNA of many monsters he's slain to create a new monster to kill Godzilla. Who is this monster he speaks of? Hedorah, the smog monster. You see what I mean when I say that these kaijus can get some crazy alternate origins? He's been apparently splicing DNA from other monsters such as Fin Fang Foom to create Hedorah. You know, the space dragon. Yeah, I definitely see some of that here. This is such a great comic. So, let's also come up with another origin for Hedorah. An origin to how he'd fit in the Monsterverse. I've been wanting to make a Monsterverse video for so long, and for so long I've had you guys always bring up Monsterverse videos, and I do genuinely like doing them, so here's how I fit Hedorah into the Monsterverse. And I wouldn't use the Hollow Earth energy as his origin points either. So, Hedorah's main origin is that he's an alien, from the dark gaseous nebula from the Orion constellation, arriving from the Ikeya comet that's been traveling for 243 years. Despite aliens being a common occurrence in the Showa, Heisei, and Millennium era, it's only happened one time with King Hedorah in the Monsterverse, and I wanted to get some content from that. Showa Hedorah was most likely a small organism riding on the comet from the dark gaseous nebula, resembling a tadpole when he landed. I wanted this to tie into King Hedorah. The Monsterverse makes the Titans act as a part of nature, such as having a food chain and concepts like the Alpha Titan. Here, the Titans aren't depicted as evil, sadistic villains, but simply as animals. They view Mothra and Godzilla's relationship as symbiotic, which happens in nature. King Ghidorah arriving as an invasive species, aiming to be the Alpha, influencing weaker and less intelligent animals to serve under him, which happens in nature, and strong animals who are also smart wouldn't submit to him, like Kong never responding to the Alpha call, which also happens in nature. And so I wanted it to be connected. Assuming the Zillions don't exist in the Monsterverse and King Ghidorah flew all the way to Earth, there was probably a chance he flew nearby the Dark Nebula. It is said that the nebula contained many members of Hedorah's species, eating the chemicals that nebulas have and produce. What chemicals do they have though? A nebula is mostly made up of hydrogen and helium, many other elements including carbon, oxygen, sulfur, magnesium, silicon, and more. Many of these elements are ionized. A chemical being ionized involves turning a molecule into an ion, usually by removing or adding electrons. So these Hedorahs are feasting on chemicals including ionized gases within the nebula, and a creature like King Hedorah flew by. King Hedorah, of course, can generate and manipulate massive amounts of electricity. So there could be a good chance that when Ghidorah flew by this nebula, one of the Hedorahs could have been attracted to and latched onto Ghidorah, being fed massive amounts of energy, and the nebula is 243 light years away, meaning that if Ghidorah flew at the speed of light, Hedorah would have been feeding on his energy for 243 years at least. So, timeline still occurs, King Ghidorah arrives to Earth in ancient times, fights Godzilla and Mothra, gets frozen in Antarctica. This whole time, the small Hedorah tadpole is still attached to Ghidorah. Now, it's also had energy from Godzilla and Mothra, Hollow Earth energy and Cherenkov radiation, which is the primary radiation Godzilla emits. For who knows how long Ghidorah was frozen in ice, Hedorah was festering. Not only has it had a good amount of Ghidorah's energy, but also new forms of energy from other titans. So once Ghidorah gets freed again and fights Godzilla, that's when Hedorah makes his escape. He goes to the ocean and starts feeding on whatever he could find. He's still small and easily undetectable. However, as the years go by, he keeps feeding and feeding on whatever he can. Toxic chemical spills, oil leaks, pollution, encountering titans like Behemoth or Skrilla, getting more servings of radiation and Hollow Earth energy. Eventually, after the events of Godzilla x Kong, Hedorah has become more noticeable. Oil rigs start getting attacked, with survivors saying how the oil leaks would disappear almost instantly. This would be due to Hedorah just straight up devouring the leaking oil, and then Hedorah would strike, destroying the oil rig, trying to eat everything it can. This is Hedorah during his aquatic stage, specifically for diving. Staying at a smaller size for maneuverability, he would be able to secrete a mist similar to an octopus secreting ink, to avoid detection from submarines and the like. Now Monarch is investigating these sites. Eventually, nuclear power plants and electric grids are getting attacked too. At first, it's like a flood of black fluid seeping into these plants and fields. And then, Hedorah is growing larger and larger, into more of his landing stage. Throughout the years of attacking other titans and feeding off energy, Hedorah's grown rather strong. These titans are flowing with hollow earth energy and radiation, to the point that whenever it leaves a site, like a destroyed oil rig or electric grid, there's traces of radiation and hollow earth energy that's left behind with this thick black goo. Over time, this consumption of energies and chemicals has made Hedorah grow larger and larger. This has also given him a couple more abilities. For one, electromagnetism. Hedorah would achieve his flying stage this way. Flattening himself like a saucer, Hedorah would pick up the ability to float and fly via electromagnetic waves. The 243 years of living on Hedorah, and including the possible thousands of years he's been frozen with him, Hedorah would gain the ability of controlling electricity and the electromagnetic waves. This would also allow him to swim much better underwater too, and even be able to repel submarines in his aquatic stage. When he starts flying, his body would also create something like a propulsion system, using the many chemicals he's absorbed to create a gas combustion to boost his speed in the air. All of this would give him the ability to spray an acidic mist whenever he flies, melting and breaking down whatever it touches so later he can absorb it, from buildings to pollutants to even titans. This would be a main way of absorbing from now on. He wouldn't have to fight as much, and he can cover large areas of the acidic mist to absorb it more easily and gain more strength. However, all these chemicals just aren't enough. He got a taste of hollow earth energy millennia ago. This energy could really fuel him. That's when he grows large enough to specifically take on titans, overpowering and absorbing them, feeding on their radiation, organic matter, and hollow earth energy. He can also absorb traits as well, such as memory and certain abilities, like how when a titan knows how to reach the hollow earth, memories of Godzilla becoming the alpha, and even certain abilities. If he absorbed my Monsterverse version of Anguirus, he'd grow spikes and gain the ability of kinetic energy absorption and expulsion. If he absorbed Godzilla, he'd gain Godzilla's abilities, such as radiation expulsion, strength, and many other things. Which is what Hedorah is now trying to do, once he reaches his perfect stage. This is Hedorah at his strongest, now acting like a hive mind, just like his Showa self, made up of smaller Hedorahs. He's able to multiply and split off, going off to find other sources of energy, pollutions, and chemicals. With his memory and sensing absorption, he now knows that titans like Godzilla hold massive amounts of hollow earth energy and knows where the hollow earth is itself. However, a flaw with his multiplication ability is the hive mind itself. The smaller pieces of Hedorah need a way to recombine. Thus, before he achieved his perfect form, he evolves the two orbs that are shown in the Showa era. These are apparently described as eyeballs, but it just doesn't really make sense. In this version, these are orbs that also produce electromagnetism, so the smaller sludges of Hedorah can figure out where the main body is and regroup together. But because electromagnetism is now a main part of Hedorah's abilities, he's gained another, just like his Showa counterpart, the heat vision. It's shown as red lightning bolts that can even burn Godzilla. In this version, these two orbs he has are near Hedorah's eyes, channeling electromagnetic energy to create these laser beams and focus it out of his eyes, which is also why his eyes are red. The vibrant red energy that's burning within them, and once he discharges his energy, it's shot out like lightning bolts, but of course thousands of times more potent, possibly able to even match King Ghidorah's. So not only does he have the added electromagnetism, multiplication, acidic absorption, and lightning eyes, in his perfect stage, he's also incredibly dangerous physically. He would be able to alter his size, such as being smaller to even towering over Godzilla. He would also be able to manipulate his density as well. I'm sure you guys heard of this thing called oobleck, which is probably something you did back in science class in elementary school. It's when you mix in cornstarch with a bit of water. It becomes a non-Newtonian fluid. Without any tension or kinetic force, it will act like a thick liquid, but if you smack it, it immediately becomes dense and solid. Depending on the amount, you can even walk on it. and if you stop moving, you immediately start sinking. So, Hedorah in his perfect stage will be able to manipulate his body like that. He'd be able to liquefy himself into this thick goo. If Godzilla were to attempt to tail swipe him, Hedorah could let it pass through his body, or he'd make himself so dense, Godzilla's tail would bounce off. Kaijus of course fight very physically, so it would be hell for even Godzilla to be able to fight Hedorah like this. A kaiju who can't be harmed physically. Every time Godzilla would try to hit him, he would sink into Hedorah, or it wouldn't even harm him, as this type of liquid is amazing at absorbing kinetic energy. Not only can Hedorah control the density of his body, but also the texture and shape as well. Hedorah in Final Wars has something like a whip for an arm. I was thinking with perfect stage Hedorah, why not add into that? Hedorah would be able to manipulate his body to create armor and weapons, stuff like creating spikes to ward off kaiju trying to grab him like Godzilla, condensing his outer layers to form a type of armor to handle cutting and slicing attacks like Mothra's stinger, even extend parts of his body and harden the ends, to even form things like swords, spears, and blades. This version of Hedorah is incredibly powerful, even for the Monsterverse. With all these abilities, there's gotta be a way to beat him, right? Of course. Moisture. He's still gonna have that classic weakness from back then, but removing moisture from Hedorah is a hell of a lot harder than his Showa counterpart, because Showa Hedorah was vulnerable to things like electricity and it would dry him out, and this version of Hedorah literally fed on it for thousands of years. So how can anyone get rid of Hedorah's moisture? Hedorah in this version has shown resistance to heat. He was surviving off Ghidorah for centuries. Who can get rid of moisture within Hedorah's body? A titan you wasn't expecting. Tiamat. But wait, we all saw Godzilla x Kong when Tiamat was cut into multiple pieces by Godzilla. True, she basically got sliced apart by his atomic beam. But it turns out, Tiamat's species have a healing factor. In the end of Monsterverse Declassified, a sample was analyzed and it was shown that her cells have a rate decay of 0%, meaning it's still alive and radioactive. Not just that, we're shown Tiamat's head that was still preserved, so there's a very large possibility that Tiamat herself can make an appearance again. If she's able to regenerate her body from her head, it would take a very long time, but there might be a way to boost up the process. Energy, radiation, and hollow earth energy. Hypothetically, since it's known Tiamat can manipulate water to an extent, she might be the only titan who can possibly expose Hedorah's weakness of the need for moisture. They then start imbuing her with good amounts of radiation and hollow earth energy. Then, once she's grown powerful enough, that's when she can help take on Hedorah. You know how Ghidorah has that corrosive acid? Tiamat has shown a resistance to something similar in a prequel scene by a starfish-like titan named Abzu. She also has an ink that she expels that binds titans, in which there is a possibility that if Hedorah grabs onto her, she might be able to create some sort of film that repels his body. As well as if Hedorah's sludge mixes in with the ink, it starts to create clumps in his body that he can't manipulate. Tiamat will basically be the saving grace for this Hedorah, with the possibility of resisting his corrosive acid, disabling Hedorah by making his body develop large clumps he can't control, and then using her ability of manipulating water to get rid of Hedorah's moisture. Now yes, Tiamat can mainly control maelstroms and water sprouts, but Hedorah is still made up of moisture, including a lot of water. I don't see how Tiamat might not be able to manipulate at least some of the water in Hedorah's body, trying to pull some of it out, allowing Godzilla to blast those specific portions to destroy a large part of Hedorah's body. Now, what would be the final move to completely destroy Hedorah as much as possible? Obviously, Hedorah would call back in the hundreds of mini Hedorahs that he sent out, trying to gain as much mass as possible to survive fighting Godzilla. But this is important actually, as they can't allow any traces of Hedorah to still survive. In Hedorah's weakened, dehydrated state, Godzilla would detect the two electromagnetic globes within Hedorah. And since it seems Godzilla is still evolved, the two globes cannot possibly withstand the overwhelming amount of energy evolved Godzilla would have. With Godzilla shooting out his strongest atomic ray at the globes and Hedorah's main body that's trying to grow more mass, completely overwhelming Hedorah with just so much power that his body cannot withstand it at all, and eventually, along with the two globes, just completely disintegrates, ending Hedorah once and for all. I think this sort of scenario would be possible if I were able to do this. Ever since Godzilla vs. Kong came out, The series has taken a more energetic turn, with Godzilla x Kong making it concrete of how insane the verse can get, with possibilities now being almost endless. It was a bit difficult trying to see how I'd fit Hedora here. I didn't want to just base him off titans like Amhaluk, as I felt like that would be a bit too obvious, and I wanted to make him an alien as well, that's also tied in with Ghidorah. And I thought that adding in things like him being able to make weapons and hardening his outer surface to reduce damage would have made him more dangerous. I think if this version of Hedora would be official, he'd probably be one of the most dangerous versions of Hedora out there. I actually had a lot of fun making this, and I will be making more Monsterverse videos since you guys really like them. And for my next Monsterverse video after one of those, I was thinking of bringing in monsters outside of Toho, like monsters from the Gamera series and the Ultraman series. So stay tuned, please be kind to yourselves and each other. Thanks for watching.